thirst for some significance of the both dimensional kind, you enter a realm of spirit, of sight and sound and mind. Your radio is a cosmic doorway and your psyche begins to spark. When you tune in to Gary and the Sun and Night Dreams After Dark.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with our host, Gary Anderson.
Well, we're down to the last half an hour of the show here tonight. Again, a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to the show. Without you, we wouldn't be where we're at today. A big shout out also to Metatron Power and Light for their bumper music, and Earl Grey, who is actually a member of Mouthman in California, with his bumper music. I just want to say thank you guys. Now, Joe is back. He wants to say something about global warming, and hey, I'm anything about global warming. I'm ready to go.
Well, I want to say again, scientists make a lot of assumptions, and we think whatever they say is the word of God. You know, you got to believe it. Well, I've been in this business a long time, and I know they change their minds all the time. I know why they say some of the things you do. I just don't give a lot of stock. But if you look at any chart, any geological chart that's thought up by the evolutionists, you see the Earth used to be really warm and tepid and tropical, and then something happened and it became kind of like a savanna, but it got cold in certain places. It got freezing cold, and all the mammoths died off and all this stuff. And then we end up with the buffalo and the wolves and the turkeys and people. The whole Ice Age thing, like you said, the weather can change in one place because of some reason, sunspots, something happening under the earth, volcanism, a tsunami, a split in the continent causes the changes the flow of water for a while, which causes the air to be cold or warm. If you look at the Ice Age animals, and I've worked with tons of them, I just saw a bunch more. Some of my friends have got just about every single one of them, and they're not cold. They're not cold animals. I don't think you're going to find a giant sloth 8 or 10 or 12 feet tall up in Montana where there's nothing but scrub to eat and in the ice, fitting the ice. They always showed mammoths as using their big tusks to rake away the snow so they can find the grass. I don't believe that. And maybe for a little while as they were trying to escape. But mammoths, and again, I'm going on an ancient report here from the Vereshkovich mammoth. They found a mummy over there, and they got a lot of it, but it had no oil glands in the skin. Unless that's been changed, that sounds right. They don't have an oil gland. They have all that hair, right? But it doesn't keep them warm like a polar bear, and polar bears have different hair anyway. So there have been a lot of assumptions about the Ice Age. And it looks to me like the ice did form in great glaciers up along the northern edge of the United States and Canada. And it looks like that as fast as it moved southward, it melted back northward. So you got all these mastodons down there. They're just in lush greenery all the time. They're like African elephants. They're living in verdant world. They don't have to worry about the ice and the snow and all that stuff. So I think you're right. It can be localized. And I'll say one more time, the government just wants to have any excuse. An educational crisis, an economic crisis, a health crisis, environmental crisis, a temperature crisis. Everything's a crisis, so give us your money, give control so we can take over your life and save you. To me, that's what a lot of it's about. And, a lot of scientists have come forward and said, there's no global warming, it's all a hoax. We're messing with the figures up here because that's what we're kind of hired to do. Well, good for you, but, give your money back. Anyway, I think you're exactly right. It can be localized, and there's just been a lot of assumptions we've lived by all these years, which has confused the facts. So is there something changing in the earth? I'm telling you, man, we've been driving through the barren part of Arizona here from, Phoenix over here now to the edge of New Mexico, and it is one lava flow all the way. It's, I don't know, it must be hundreds of feet thick, but all those hills out there, they're basically just lava cones, and we built roads over them. When did that happen, and what did that do to the environment? Can you imagine that if half of Arizona and part of California were covered in hot, molten lava? I saw a thing a while ago that there's some of the trees in the rainforest put off so much water they create a cloud and it rains. Well, if you put hot lava out there for hundreds of miles, what's that going to do to the environment? And all the animals 100 miles away, all of a sudden are either drowned because it rains so much, or they starve to death because there's nothing green to eat. People just need to take some of these scientific papers with a grain of salt. I'm sorry to say that, but that's true.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. You think our government would tell us the truth? I mean, if they knew that something major was coming down, they're not going to tell us because people would freak out and panic. Even if it's 40 years from now or 100 years from now, I can say this. The sea levels are rising because I know somebody who lives in a small town in Florida that said now, as when they get a high tide, the manholes in the town, all of a sudden water comes shooting out. I know that we have to be stupid not to realize it. What would happen if from the water belt coming from the equator, all of a sudden that movement of that warm water stops? Yeah, it's going to go into a mini ice age or ice age in Europe. We don't know if that's going to happen or when or if. All we do know is Antarctica, Greenland, and a lot of other places are melting. They just found in Antarctica warm water under a huge glacier that, to me, sounds like maybe it's volcanic activity happening underneath it and warming the water up. That's my take on it.
Well, look at how barren Australia is and how barren other parts of the country are, Texas and New Mexico. Shoot, if it started warming up here and raining, if the glaciers melted and gave us more water, well, you could farm all of Alaska if all that ice melted off, because it didn't used to be there. Down in Houston, they say, and I don't know if it's true or not, but they told me that Houston's sinking 12 inches a year. Well, okay, I'm selling my property if I had any down there.
Yeah.
But that's all ice age animals buried down there, right? Well, Houston, I don't think Houston's ever been cold. It ain't cold now, Be a freak thing if it ever got cold down there. That's why there's so many mammoths and big bison and all that stuff down there. But Alaska didn't used to be covered up in ice. Siberia didn't used to be. Greenland didn't used to be covered up in ice. Let's melt it and see what's over there. Would be a boon for farmers, maybe. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Everybody could move, somewhere where it's warm.
Yeah, it could. That just makes me think, too, that, like in Dallas, you're saying it's sinking in the ground. But think about this. Don't they have...
Houston is, anyway.
Yeah, Houston. They've been pumping oil out of Texas for how many years?
Yeah.
And then when they pump it out, What I read is they pump water back in the ground. That's why I asked you about sinkholes, because you know what? Water is thinner than oil. So if you remove this thick blood out of the earth and replace it with water, hey, maybe it might be stabilized for a while, but eventually you're going to have land masses dropping down, or you're going to have, big sinkholes appearing, and that's what's going on.
You may have whole areas that are sinkholes because they've taken an ocean of oil out from under the earth. There's a big cavity down there. An earthquake goes off, it might just cause the whole thing to give way and collapse. And we'd have a big lake right in the middle of Texas.
Yeah, or an ocean.
An ocean. Yeah, and we can't control it. There's no way we control what's happening inside the earth. That's God's domain, and whatever he allows with the sun, we can't control the sun. It's cars aren't doing any of this stuff. It's we don't put as much smog in the air now as they did back in the 1800s when everybody burned coal in England and Chicago. Man, the air was awful. It was awful in 1967 when I lived in Greenwich Village in New York City. It was awful. L.A. in 1969 was terrible. So it's not near as bad as it was 50 years ago. So
I just think it's a combination
if the water rises up, there's New York, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, Yeah, well, hey, the stock market can go underwater. Underwater, you get it, from the, ocean. But I can say this. I think it's a combination of everything. I'm sure what we are put, not so much in our country, but, like China and some other countries are the number one polluters, period. And what they have done and are doing makes whatever we ever done look like nothing. I can tell you this.
Yeah, really.
Years and years and years ago, I worked part-time because I've been in radio since 76. I also was in photography. And one of my photography clients was a bike company called Raleigh Nashiki out of Kent, Washington. And I would photograph their new bikes. The bikes were assembled in our country at that time, but they were made in China, the frames and stuff. Why? Because the paint, what we have in our country, because of all the laws from the EPA, the paint would scratch easy. Well, they can use a different type of paint in China because they have no laws on it, and the paint was more durable. It would be more resistant to scratches and stuff, but it's highly toxic. So, you think about all that. I mean, that if we're going to have anything that Earth changes because of our pollution, blame it on, countries like China, India, and all these other countries that have no laws on pollution, and they're putting mass amount of pollution out, way worse than we have ever done in our country.
You see a lot of shots in China, and people wearing masks before this coronavirus thing, but because the air's bad over there, and they clean it up like we did, but we cannot control volcanism. Now, this whole thing with the oil being drained out and the ocean of oil, the cavities under the earth in Texas and Oklahoma collapsing. We are doing that, but we're not in control of the sun. So I don't know. It's also, people don't like to talk about it, but God has judged the earth several times. That may be what's going on right there. Maybe as simple as that.
Well, maybe it's time for a reboot here in the next 50 to 100 years. I really feel strongly that we have been rebooted. Now, our time is virtually up. How can they find your books, Joe? I know on my website I got your picture up of your museum and all that stuff. How can they find your museum? How can they find you and whatever? Why don't you tell us?
The museum is open again, and we're at the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum, 124 West Main Street, Crosbyton, Texas, 79322 for GPS. You can go to www.mountblanco.com, and my book, Facts and Fantasies, Fossil Facts and Fantasies, Giants Against Evolution, my book on all